when a ruthless billionaire CEO fired a single father to replace him with 12 Ivy League engineers, she thought she was cutting dead weight. She didn't know he was the only man on Earth who knew how to keep her billion-dollar empire from sinking. This is what happens when arrogance meets reality. Did not look like the most important man in the global offshore energy sector. At 42, he possessed the permanent quiet exhaustion of a man who worked 90-hour weeks and raised a child entirely alone. His hands were perpetually calloused, his fingernails stained with a faint rim of synthetic grease that no industrial soap could entirely wash away, and his uniform was a pair of faded canvas coveralls. But Arthur was the chief mechanic on the Apex Horizon, the crown jewel of the Vanguard Offshore Corporation. The Horizon wasn't just a ship, it was a mobile, ultra-deep-water drill ship the size of 3 football fields, currently operating in the treacherous waters of the North Sea. At the heart of this floating city was the main power generation matrix, a behemoth custom-built diesel-electric turbine complex known informally to the crew as the Iron Lung. For 12 years, Arthur had kept the Iron Lung breathing. Arthur's life was divided into 2 absolute devotions, that massive, vibrating hunk of metal and his 9-year-old daughter, Maya. Maya was back in Galveston, Texas, staying with Arthur's older sister while he worked his grueling 6-week rotations. Maya had been born with a rare congenital heart defect that required regular, intensely expensive specialized care. His wife had passed away from complications shortly after Maya's birth, leaving Arthur to shoulder a mountain of medical debt and the terrifying, beautiful burden of keeping his little girl alive. The Horizon paid well, but every cent Arthur made went to Galveston Memorial Hospital and Maya's upcoming valve replacement surgery. He couldn't afford to lose this job. He didn't even entertain the possibility that he could. Then came the corporate buyout. Vanguard Offshore was acquired by the Kestrel Group, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate headed by a 32-year-old billionaire CEO named Evelyn Kestrel. Evelyn had inherited the company from her father, but had ruthlessly expanded it by trimming inefficiencies. She was brilliant, fiercely driven, and viewed the world entirely through the lens of data analytics, algorithms, and profit margins. To Evelyn, if a problem couldn't be solved with a predictive computer model, it wasn't a real problem. 2 weeks after the acquisition, Evelyn flew out to the Apex Horizon on a private Sikorsky helicopter, bringing with her a team of 12 elite engineers. They were led by Dr. Richard Gable, a man with 2 doctorates from MIT, who had never held a wrench in his life. They gathered in the deafening, heat-soaked engine room. Arthur stood by the main control console of the Iron Lung, wiping oil from his hands with a red rag, as Evelyn and her pristine, spotless engineering team inspected his domain. "Mr. Pendleton," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the mechanical roar via the crew's comm headsets. She looked at his analog logbooks, filled with handwritten notes, oil smudge fingerprints, and strange shorthand symbols. "Dr. Gable has been reviewing the telemetry data from this vessel. The efficiency ratings on this turbine cluster are operating at a completely unacceptable variance. You're running manual overrides on the fuel injection and the thermal regulators." "Yes, ma'am," Arthur replied evenly. "The number 3 cylinder has a micro-fracture in the casing. It's been there for 4 years. If you run the digital factory specs, it'll run too hot and warp the camshaft. I have to feather the injection timing manually to keep the pressure balanced. I also bypass the automated cooling loop during heavy swells because the pitch of the ship starves the intake valves." Dr. Gable scoffed, adjusting his safety glasses. "Ms. Kestrel, this is exactly the kind of antiquated blue-collar guesswork I mentioned in my report. He's operating a $200 million turbine on feeling and manual workarounds. It's an immense liability. My team can install a unified AI-driven control system, recalibrate the hardware to factory zero, and increase output efficiency by 14%. Evelyn looked at Arthur, her expression devoid of malice, just cold, calculating business. Mr. Pendleton, Kestrel Group is modernizing. We don't rely on handwritten notes and guesswork. I'm replacing your position with Dr. Gable's 12-man diagnostic team. They will digitize and optimize this entire deck. Arthur's heart dropped into his stomach. The thought of Maya's upcoming surgery flashed behind his eyes, the crippling bills, the specialized pediatric cardiologist who required payment up front. Ms. Kestrel, please, Arthur said, taking a step forward. He swallowed his pride. I know this machine. She doesn't run on math alone anymore. She's old. She's been modified dozens of times, and she has a temper. You put a computer in charge of that fractured cylinder, it won't know how to listen to the vibrations. It will tear itself apart. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I find it hard to believe that 12 elite engineers with PhDs cannot manage a diesel engine better than one man with a high school diploma. Your severance package will be wired to your account. Pack your things. You're on the helicopter back to Aberdeen this afternoon. Arthur stood in silence. He looked at Evelyn, then at the smirking Dr. Gable, and finally up at the massive steel housing of the iron lung. He knew what was going to happen, but he also knew the golden rule of corporate pride. They never listened to the guy in the dirty coveralls. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. Arthur simply placed his stained red rag on the console, picked up his duffel bag, and walked out. On his way past Dr. Gable, Arthur paused and said quietly, "When the primary intake starts humming in the key of B-flat, you have exactly 60 seconds to kill the pressure, or she'll blow the manifold. Remember that." Gable just rolled his eyes. By nightfall, Arthur was on a commercial flight back to Texas, unemployed, terrified for his daughter's life, and entirely unaware of the catastrophic chain reaction he had just left behind. The first 48 hours on the apex horizon without Arthur Pendleton were a corporate triumph. Dr. Gable and his 12 engineers stripped out Arthur's analog gauges, disabled his manual bypasses, and hooked the turbine matrix up to a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar AI diagnostic server. They flooded the system with factory-standard algorithms. According to the screens in the air-conditioned control room, efficiency was up 12%. Evelyn Kestrel, monitoring the data from her penthouse office in Houston, was thrilled. She drafted a company-wide memo highlighting the successful modernization of the Horizon as proof that human intuition was obsolete. But down in the dark, blistering belly of the ship, the iron lung was slowly choking to death. It started on the morning of the third day. The North Sea weather took a violent turn, whipping up 40-foot swells. The massive drill ship relied on dynamic positioning, a highly complex system where the ship's engines constantly power thrusters to keep the vessel perfectly still over the drill hole, despite the raging ocean. If the ship drifted even a few dozen feet, the drill pipe connecting the ship to the ocean floor 2 miles down would snap, causing a catastrophic blowout that would make the deep-water Horizon disaster look like a minor spill. As the waves battered the hull, the ship pitched violently. Just as Arthur had warned, the angle of the ship starved the automated cooling loop's intake valves. Up in the pristine control room, Dr. Gable's AI system detected a drop in coolant. Following its programming, the computer did what it was supposed to do. It increased the flow rate and ramped up the engine RPMs to compensate. But the AI didn't know about the microfracture in cylinder number 3. It didn't know that Arthur used to stand by the manual valve during storms, listening to the pitch of the metal, easing the pressure back to prevent overheating. The computer demanded more power. The engine screamed. A sudden, deep thrumming echoed through the lower decks. A high-pitched vibration began to rattle the steel walkways. It was humming in the key of B-flat. "Dr. Toll!" one of the elite engineers shouted, staring at a monitor flashing bright red. "Thermal runaway in Sector 3. Casing temperatures are spiking off the charts. The algorithm is trying to balance it, but the sensors are throwing garbage data." "Override it!" Gable barked, rushing to the console. "Force the cooling loop open." "I'm trying. The digital actuators are locked. The metal is warping from the heat. The system doesn't understand the mechanical resistance." Deep inside the engine, the warped camshaft finally caught. The resulting friction spike was apocalyptic. With a deafening concussive boom that shook the entire 300-meter vessel, the iron lung initiated its automated safety shutdown to prevent an explosion. The massive turbines ground to a halt. The lights across the entire ship flickered, died, and were replaced by the dim, eerie red glow of emergency battery backups. The apex horizon had lost main power. On the bridge, the ship's captain slammed his fist on the console. "We've lost dynamic positioning. Thrusters are offline. We are drifting," he roared into the radio. "Gable, get that power plant back online right now, or we are going to snap the drill pipe in less than 40 minutes. Panic gripped the engine room. The 12 elite engineers scrambled like ants. They plugged in their laptops, ran diagnostic algorithms, rebooted the servers, and furiously typed lines of code. But an engine is not a software program. It is a beast of physics, heat, and pressure. "Restart the sequence initiated," Gable yelled, hitting the master ignition. The starter motors whined, engaging the massive flywheel. Chug, chug, hiss. The engine seized and immediately shut down again. The computer monitors simply read, "Error 404. Unknown mechanical fault. System lockout." "Bypass the lockout." "We can't," an engineer screamed back, sweat pouring down his face. "The AI says the physical parameters are out of bounds. The camshaft alignment is off by 3 millimeters, and the fuel injectors are flooded. The computer refuses to allow ignition." "Then fix the alignment." "It requires a manual teardown of the block. It would take 3 days." Every trick they had learned at M1T and Stanford failed. They threw every piece of advanced software at the problem, but the engine remained a tall, silent giant. They didn't know which valve was stuck. They didn't know how to trick the pressure sensors. They didn't know the physical feel of the machine. In Houston, Evelyn Kestrel's phone exploded. She was pulled out of a board meeting to see the live telemetry from the horizon. The ship was drifting. The tension on the ultra-deep water drill pipe was in the red zone. If it snapped, Kestrel Group would be liable for billions in environmental damages. The company would be seized by the government, and Evelyn would face criminal negligence charges. Her empire was collapsing by the second. "Get Gable on the line," she screamed at her assistant. When Gable's voice came over the speaker, he sounded small, terrified and utterly defeated. "Ms. Kestrel, I don't know what's wrong. The math is perfect and the code is flawless. But the engine, it just won't start. It's physically locked out. We've tried everything. You have 12 of the most expensive engineers on the planet down there." Evelyn raged, her cool demeanor entirely shattered. "You told me you could optimize it." "The machine is illogical," Gable shouted defensively. There are undocumented modifications everywhere, welds that shouldn't hold, bypassed pressure valves, analog shunts. The computer can't process it. It's a Frankenstein's monster. Evelyn stared at the massive digital map on her wall. The tiny dot representing her billion-dollar drill ship was inching closer and closer to the breaking point. She was losing millions of dollars a minute. Her eyes drifted down to her desk. Lying there was the scanned copy of the oily, handwritten logbook Arthur Pendleton had kept. She had brought it back as a trophy, a prime example of the inefficiency she had eradicated. She opened the cover. The last entry, dated the day Arthur was fired, had a note hastily scribbled in the margin. Cylinder 3 getting worse. If some idiot pushes the factory baseline, the thermal expansion will lock the safety sear. Only way to unlock is to manually bleed the secondary pneumatic line while striking the manifold housing to reset the pin. Good luck. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the clock. They had 30 minutes before the drill pipe snapped. She picked up her personal cell phone. She had to make the most humiliating phone call of her life. She had to call the single father she had thrown away. Arthur Pendleton was sitting in a cracked vinyl chair in the pediatric cardiology wing of Galveston Memorial Hospital when his phone vibrated. He was staring blindly at a piece of paper in his hands. It was the preliminary estimate for Maya's open-heart surgery, scheduled for next Tuesday. The out-of-pocket cost, even with his now terminated health insurance, was staggering. The hospital administrator had apologetically informed him that without a $50,000 deposit by Friday, they would have to postpone the valve replacement. Maya's heart couldn't afford a postponement. He rubbed his exhausted eyes. He had spent the last 48 hours making frantic calls, trying to secure a predatory personal loan. He had nothing left to pawn, nothing left to sell. The phone buzzed again. The caller ID read, "Blocked number." Arthur almost ignored it, assuming it was a debt collector, but something made him swipe the green icon. "Pendleton," he answered, his voice rough. "Mr. Pendleton." The voice on the other end was clipped, breathless, and laced with a barely concealed panic. "This is Evelyn Kestrel." Arthur sat up straight, the hospital bill crinkling in his grip. The memory of her cold, dismissive eyes in the engine room flashed through his mind. "I don't work for you anymore, Miss Kestrel. My severance hasn't cleared yet, if that's why you're calling." "The Apex Horizon has lost main power," Evelyn said, skipping any semblance of corporate pleasantries. "The AI system triggered a total lockout. The drill pipe is at critical tension. We are drifting. If we don't restore dynamic positioning in 28 minutes, the pipe snaps, and I lose the vessel and the well." Arthur felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach, quickly followed by a sharp, sudden spark of realization. "Cylinder number 3, he said quietly. Somebody pushed the factory baseline. The thermal expansion locked the safety sear. "You wrote it in your logbook," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. "You knew this would happen. I told you she had a temper, Miss Kestrel. I told you a computer wouldn't understand her. Did you read the rest of the note?" "Yes. Manually bleed the secondary pneumatic line and strike the manifold housing. I relayed that to Dr. Gable, but the AI has locked down the electronic bleed valves. It won't let them vent the pressure. Gable says a manual override will cause a localized pressure explosion. He won't do it." "Gable is an idiot," Arthur stated flatly. "The computer thinks the pressure is uniform, but the fracture acts as a natural vent. It won't explode if you hit it at the exact right angle, but you have to bypass the digital governor entirely. It requires a physical sequence, a very specific one." "Then tell me the sequence," Evelyn demanded. "I am ordering you to tell me the sequence." Arthur looked through the glass window of the hospital room opposite his chair. Maya was sleeping, hooked up to a terrifying array of monitors, her small chest rising and falling with labored shallowness. For 12 years, Arthur had been the company man. He had bled for Vanguard Offshore, and he had been thrown out like a piece of defective machinery by the Kestrel Group. But right now, Arthur was no longer just an unemployed mechanic. He was the only man on Earth holding the keys to Evelyn Kestrel's multi-billion-dollar empire. He held all the cards. "I don't take orders from you anymore," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, settling into a cold, hard steel. "And I don't give away my expertise for free." There was a stunned silence on the line. "Are you extorting me, Mr. Pendleton? I have lawyers who will bury you." "Bury me? You're about to cause the biggest ecological disaster in the North Sea since Piper Alpha, and your company will be liquidated by the federal government by tomorrow morning. Your lawyers will be too busy keeping you out of federal prison to worry about me." Arthur stood up, his heart pounding, but his voice remained absolutely steady. "You have 25 minutes until that pipe snaps. Here are my terms." "Terms?" Evelyn hissed. "My daughter needs a specialized pediatric cardiac surgeon. Her name is Dr. William Hartman at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. You are going to call him personally, right now, and tell him you are fully underwriting Maya Pendleton's surgery. Then you are going to wire $3 million, tax-free, into my checking account as a non-disclosure and consulting fee. Not tomorrow, right now." $3 million? Are you out of your mind? 24 minutes, Evelyn. The tension on that pipe is exponential. Once it hits 80%, the shear pins will start failing. What's the apex horizon worth? 2 billion? 3? Is my price really that high? Arthur heard the sound of frantic typing in the background of Evelyn's call, followed by shouted updates from her Houston control room. "Tension is at 82%, Ms. Kestrel," a voice yelled in the background. "The blowout preventer is groaning." Evelyn's breath shuddered over the phone. "Give me your routing number." Within 6 minutes, Arthur's phone pinged with a notification from his bank. A wire transfer for $3 million had cleared. A moment later, an email arrived confirming that Dr. William Hartman's office had been retained for Maya. Arthur felt a tear slip down his cheek, but he wiped it away instantly. He couldn't afford to be emotional. He had a ship to save. "The money is there," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "Now save my ship. Patch me through to the engine room on a secure video link. I need to see what I'm doing," Arthur commanded. Seconds later, Arthur's phone screen flickered, displaying the chaotic, red-lit hellscape of the Horizon's engine room. The camera was being held by a terrified technician. Dr. Gable was standing near the main console, sweating profusely, screaming at a laptop screen that was flashing fatal error. "Gable!" Arthur's voice boomed through the engine room's PA system, patched in from Houston. Gable's head snapped up, staring at the camera. "Pendleton? Thank God. Tell us the master admin code to bypass the pneumatic lock. The AI won't let us vent." "There is no code, Doctor," Arthur said coldly. "You have to do it physically. Go to the port side of cylinder 3. There is a brass analog valve hidden behind the primary manifold. You need to turn it counterclockwise with a pipe wrench, wait for the hiss, and then strike the sear pin housing with a 20-pound sledgehammer." Gable stared at the camera in horror. "Are you insane? The thermal casing is reading 400 degrees Celsius. If I vent that valve manually, the back pressure will blow boiling coolant all over me. The computer says there's a 90% chance of catastrophic rupture." "The computer doesn't know about the fracture. It's miscalculating the internal pressure, Arthur yelled, his patience gone. If you don't hit that pin in the next 5 minutes, the drill pipe snaps. I'm not doing it. Gable backed away from the engine, shaking his head. It violates every safety protocol. I'm not dying for a piece of machinery. In Houston, Evelyn Kestrel watched the feed in horror. Her elite, MIT-educated engineer was entirely paralyzed by fear and algorithmic data. He couldn't compute the physical reality of the crisis. "Is there anyone else down there?" Arthur demanded through the speakers. "Anyone?" From the back of the terrified crowd of engineers, a young man stepped forward. He was covered in grease, wearing a faded Vanguard offshore uniform. It was Tommy Baxter, a 19-year-old deckhand and junior wiper whom Arthur had taken under his wing a year ago. "I'm here, Chief," Tommy said, his voice trembling but resolute. He grabbed a heavy, long-handled sledgehammer from the emergency tool locker. "Tell me what to do." "Tommy, listen to me very carefully," Arthur said, his tone softening, shifting back into the mentor he had always been. "Put on your heavy heat gloves and a face shield. Go to the port side of cylinder 3. The camera operator followed Tommy as he approached the massive, groaning engine block. The heat radiating off the metal was visible in shimmering waves. "I see the brass valve, Chief," Tommy called out over the deafening ambient noise of the alarms. "Okay, put the wrench on it. When you crack it open, it's going to scream. It's going to sound like a banshee, and it's going to spray hot vapor. Don't let go. You have to bleed it until the pitch of the hiss drops down to a low rumble. Only then is the pressure equalized." "Understood." Tommy gritted his teeth, gripped the wrench, and wrenched it counterclockwise. Scream! A violent jet of superheated steam blasted out of the release valve. Tommy screamed as the heat washed over his protective gear, but he held his ground, keeping the valve open. The 12 elite engineers cowered behind the server racks. "Hold it, Tommy! Hold it!" Arthur watched his phone screen intensely, listening to the audio feed. He was blind to the telemetry data. He was using his ears, feeling the rhythm of the machine thousands of miles away. The shrieking hiss of the steam began to flutter. "Shh, thump! Shh, thump!" "The pitch is dropping, Chief," Tommy yelled. "Get the hammer ready," Arthur ordered. "You have to hit the circular steel housing directly above the valve. You have to hit it with everything you've got, exactly when I tell you." Tommy dropped the wrench and hoisted the heavy sledgehammer over his shoulder. The steam was obscuring the camera, but Arthur closed his eyes, listening to the mechanical heartbeat of the iron lung. He was listening for the moment the internal vacuum released the sear pin. Shh, thump. Shh, thump. Shh. "Wait for it," Arthur whispered. Click. A faint metallic clack echoed through the steam. "Now! Hit it!" Arthur roared. Tommy swung the sledgehammer in a massive, brutal arc. The heavy iron head slammed into the steel housing with a deafening crack. Sparks showered across the grated floor. For 3 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The emergency lights continued to flash. Dr. Gable buried his face in his hands. Then a deep, earth-shattering rumble began to vibrate through the deck plates. The massive diesel-electric turbines sucked in a massive gulp of air. The cylinders fired, and the iron lung roared back to life. The deafening, beautiful rhythm of heavy machinery filled the room. The red emergency lights clicked off, replaced by the brilliant white glare of the main halogen lamps. Over the comms, the captain's voice erupted from the bridge. "Main power restored. Thrusters are online. Dynamic positioning is stabilizing. Tension on the drill pipe is dropping. We are backing away from the red zone. Good God, we're holding position. The engine room erupted into cheers. Tommy dropped the sledgehammer, leaning against the railing, panting heavily. Even the elite engineers were cheering, slapping Tommy on the back. Gable just stood there, staring at the running engine, completely baffled by how a sledgehammer had fixed what his code could not. Arthur let out a long, shuddering breath and slumped back into his hospital chair. He looked at his phone screen. Evelyn Kestrel had joined the video feed from Houston. She looked pale, exhausted, and utterly humbled. "It's running," Evelyn whispered, her eyes wide. "Don't let them touch the thermal regulators again," Arthur said tiredly. "Leave it on manual. The iron lung isn't a spreadsheet, Miss Kestrel. She's a living thing. You take care of her. She takes care of you." Evelyn swallowed hard. She looked at Dr. Gable, who was still cowering near the servers. "Dr. Gable," she said, her voice suddenly turning to ice. "Pack your bags. You and your entire team are fired. The chopper will be there in an hour." She turned her attention back to the screen, looking at Arthur's exhausted face. "Mr. Pendleton. Arthur, I was wrong. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. I would like to offer you the position of Chief Director of Deep Water Engineering for the entire Kestrel Group. You name your salary." Arthur looked through the glass window again. Maya was stirring, her eyes fluttering open. He smiled. For the first time in 9 years, he felt a crushing weight lift off his chest. His daughter was going to live, and they would never have to worry about a hospital bill again. "I appreciate the offer, Miss Kestrel," Arthur said softly, "but I think I'm going to take some time off. My daughter needs me. Besides, Tommy's got the engine room under control. He knows how to listen." Arthur hung up the phone. He stood up, tucked the paid hospital bill into his pocket, and walked into Maya's room, ready to tell his little girl that everything was finally going to be all right. Sometimes the greatest expertise isn't found in an Ivy League textbook or a billionaire's algorithm, but in the calloused hands of someone who truly understands the heartbeat of their work. Arthur proved that human intuition and fierce love will always outsmart cold data. If this story of an underdog father beating the corporate machine gave you chills, hit that like button, share it with someone who respects real hard work, and subscribe for more incredible real-life dramas. What would you have done in Arthur's shoes? Let us know below.